The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid smoke of burning villages. For 2 decades, Kalen, the ironclad scourge of the northern steppes, had carved an empire out of chaos, his name a whispered prayer and a desperate curse across the ancient lands of Aerthos. His legend was written in the screams of the vanquished, the clatter of falling strongholds, and the grim silence of conquered peoples. But history, often predictable in its glorification of might, rarely anticipates the seismic shift within a soul forged in perpetual war. Kalen was no mere warlord. He was a force of nature, a living testament to the destructive potential of human will. Born into a minor clan, nestled within the unforgiving jagged peaks of the Dragontooth Mountains, his youth was a crucible of hardship and relentless training. He emerged not just as a warrior, but as a strategist of unparalleled brilliance, his tactical mind as sharp and unforgiving as the blade he wielded. His first conquest, the subjugation of the notoriously fierce hill tribes, was executed with a swiftness and brutality that sent shivers down the spine of every chieftain and king in Aerthos. From there, his momentum was unstoppable. He swept across the fertile river plains, his legions an unstoppable tide of steel and fury. The ancient kingdoms of Viridian and Solara, proud and ancient, crumbled before him. The mighty fortified cities of the coastlands, once thought impregnable, fell one by one, their gates shattered, their defenders overwhelmed not just by strength, but by Kalen's uncanny ability to anticipate every defense, exploit every weakness. His emblem, a black wolf snarling against a crimson sun, became the ultimate herald of doom. Aerthos, a vast and diverse continent, had known centuries of fragmented rule, a patchwork of competing kingdoms, free cities, and tribal territories. It was a land of stark contrasts, sun-baked deserts giving way to dense ancient forests, soaring mountain ranges overlooking shimmering inland seas, and bustling trade routes connecting distant, often hostile, cultures. Each region possessed its unique traditions, its distinctive fighting styles, and its fiercely guarded independence. Yet Kalen, in his relentless pursuit of dominion, had systematically dismantled this intricate tapestry. He didn't just defeat armies, he shattered entire ways of life. His campaigns were not simply about conquest, they were about assimilation, about forging a monolithic empire under his iron fist. He introduced his own harsh but efficient system of governance, his own universal currency, and his own draconian laws, enforced by legions of loyal veterans and a vast network of spies. Beneath his rule, the constant skirmishes and petty wars that had plagued Aerthos largely ceased, replaced by a tense, enforced peace. The peace of the tomb. For his subjects, life under Kalen was a paradox. Fear was an omnipresent companion, a cold knot in the gut. Dissent was met with swift, brutal reprisal. Yet there was also an undeniable sense of order, a security unknown in previous generations. Roads were safer, banditry almost eliminated. His engineers, repurposed from siege warfare, built magnificent aqueducts and towering fortresses that also served as granaries. Famines, once common, were mitigated by his centralized distribution systems. He demanded absolute obedience, but in return, he offered a semblance of stability. This grim order, however, came at an unimaginable cost: the suppression of individuality, the crushing of spirit, and the perpetual reign of terror that kept his vast dominion in line. Many whispered that Kalen, for all his monstrous deeds, was merely an inescapable consequence of Aerthos's ceaseless strife, a necessary evil to forge unity from chaos. They hoped, perhaps, that once his grand ambition was sated, the bloodshed would finally end. But Kalen's ambition seemed boundless, an ever-burning forge consuming all in its path. He had seen empires rise and fall, seen men crumble under the weight of their own power. Yet he seemed immune to the corruption of easy living or the fatigue of constant struggle. He slept little, ate sparingly, and trained daily, his body as lean and formidable as it had been 2 decades prior, his eyes still holding the cold, calculating fire of a predator. Yet, even in the heart of such a man, in the silent moments between battles, whispers of something else began to stir. Not doubt, not regret. Such sentiments were luxuries Kalen had long discarded. but a nascent awareness of the profound emptiness that lay beyond every victory. Each conquered city brought no lasting satisfaction, only the grim preparations for the next campaign, the next wave of destruction. He had achieved everything a warrior could dream of: supreme power, unquestioned authority, an empire spanning nearly the entire known world. Yet the taste of triumph had grown stale, metallic and bitter, much like the blood that perpetually coated his hands. He began to notice the small, insignificant details: the terrified eyes of a child huddled in a war-torn village, the stoic resignation of an elderly woman tending a makeshift grave, the quiet dignity of a vanquished chieftain refusing to kneel even at the point of Kaelin's sword. These were fleeting observations, mere blips on the radar of his strategic mind. Yet they persisted, gnawing at the edges of his hardened consciousness. He saw the broken homes, the scattered lives, the endless cycle of grief, not just as the necessary collateral damage of his conquests, but as a pervasive, unyielding sorrow that seemed to cling to the very air of his newly forged empire. He had brought order, yes, but at what price to the human spirit? The constant roar of the battlefield had begun to fade, replaced by a subtle, unsettling silence within his own being, a void where triumph should have resided. It was a void that even the greatest empire could not fill. A yearning for something undefined, something beyond the cold calculus of power and conquest. He often found himself standing on the ramparts of his latest captured citadel, gazing out at the vast, tranquil landscapes that stretched beyond the reach of his immediate conquest, wondering what it was like to simply exist, unburdened by the weight of 1,000 lives taken, 1,000 futures extinguished. It was a dangerous thought, one that challenged the very foundation of his identity, the core of the ironclad scourge. And it was this subtle shift, this almost imperceptible crack in his impenetrable facade, that set the stage for an act so profoundly out of character, so utterly unexpected, that it would shake the very foundations of Aerthos and rewrite the legend of Kaelin the conquering warrior.